All right, good evening, everybody. We'll go ahead and bring this planning commission meeting to order at 6:32 tonight. Kelly, will you please call the roll?
Okay, thank you, Chair. Commissioner Crosby,
Here.
Commissioner Ramsair,
Here.
Commissioner Poulin,
Here.
Commissioner Vincent. I see Commissioner Vincent's on the screen. Commissioner Myram. Chair Wegener.
Here.
And Rebecca, just to note, Commissioner Vincent is here. So we have 5 commissioners currently.
Thanks.
All right, with that, we'll move into our approval of the minutes. Does anybody have any additions, corrections, or deletions?
I didn't see anything.
Seeing and hearing none, we will consider the minutes approved from last meeting. Thank you all very much. We'll move to requests from the floor. The commission welcomes public comment at this time. If you're participating online and you would like to make a comment about something that is not on our agenda later today, so our public hearing, please click the raised hand button and wait to be recognized. If you're participating via telephone, please dial *9 to raise your hand and then wait to be recognized. Again, we will have time for public comment a little later on for our land use approval extension ordinance.
So you do have 3 attendees. I know who 2 of the people are though, and I'm pretty sure they're here for the public hearing. And you do not have any hands raised, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Kelly. Let's go ahead and move on to your report then.
Okay. Sorry, I'm just all out of order here today. My apologies. So the main thing I think I wanted to cover in this report was regarding the upcoming meeting schedule and to see if anybody had any suggestions or questions. I know that you'll be invited soon to a joint work session on May 20th. That will be like the first time to start looking at the comprehensive plan document that I've been working on the last few months. Patrick's put a ton of time into it. I think most of the substance you'll have seen already as far as the goals and policies and everything. And then some of the facts and figures. There will be some new sections that the commission and council have not seen in regards to history, a land use gallery, both of which Patrick wrote up. And then there will be some additional things that is probably new as well. But I do think the majority you've already reviewed. However, that said, this will be your kind of first opportunity to dive into the document itself and give suggestions or feedback for edits to the document. Mainly like layout, content, stuff like that. But our consultant is putting together that work session, so I'm sure she'll have some additional things for you to consider. And then the other meeting that we have tentatively scheduled right now is a May 28th work session on additional development code amendments. I know I believe on the last meeting, there was at least 2 or 3 people that weren't going to be able to attend a May meeting, I believe.
Yeah, I'm not here for either one of those.
Okay,
I will not be here for the 20th. We fly back the 28th, and then we get a new puppy that day.
that's gonna be tight.
So
Bring it in.
yeah, we're pretty booked, but there's a possibility.
So I think the thing I wanted to bring up is I think there's a few options. I think we could hold that meeting that night if people feel like we want to. We could have a special meeting in June at an earlier date, or you could have the typical 4th Monday with just Patrick. I won't be there. I'll be on vacation. Or we could take off the May and June meetings from Planning Commission and hold a more even robust development code amendment work session in July, since Patrick and I will have more opportunities to prepare something for you by then. Obviously it's the commission's choice how you want to proceed. But that's kind of the different options I was thinking about. I'll be gone the last 2 weeks in June, just so you're aware.
Somebody have any preferences?
Well, I'm not here either one in May. In June, we get back the 3rd of June and that full first 3 weeks. But then you're gone, so the end. I couldn't be here for the 4th, June, the 24th.
What day are we looking at in July?
Just look at the calendar. That'd be the- So the 22nd, city council typically doesn't meet if there's a 5th Monday, so we could look at July 29th if the 22nd doesn't work. We could look at the first 2 weeks in June, so we could potentially look at moving it from May 28th to June 10th, I believe. I believe June 10th, the room's open. I would have to double check tomorrow with Jeff, the deputy city manager, but I believe it is open.
And we don't have anything currently on the docket for the June meeting.
We don't have anything scheduled for a June meeting at this point. And even the May meeting, that's why I put tentative on my director's report, only because I had heard from the last meeting that there was some inability for some people to attend. One thing I would like to point out is since we're going to be bringing so many development code amendments to you over the next year, I do think it's important to have Jerry's input as much as we can, Commissioner Crosby's, because he's seen more developments through the existing code. I mean, more than I have even. So I think that perspective is pretty important.
Agreed. I saw Commissioner Poland and Vincent both unmute.
I'm unmuted.
Do you have something to add?
Yeah, I just definitely want to make sure that we have as much input from Jerry as possible. So Jerry, your dates were June was looking the best for you?
Yeah, I could do 10 or 17 in June. And in July, the 22 or 29 would work.
Those dates all work fine for me.
Commissioner Vincent, I saw you unmute as well.
Yes, those work for me as well.
It sounds like we all like the 10th. I think as far as input on those items, probably sooner rather than later for those working on it be appreciated, would be my guess.
So do we want to move the tentative date from May 28th to June 10th?
I think so.
And then I'll just confirm that it's our room for the night.
Yeah.
Okay.
Would we be able to do the workshop items there as well?
That
From the
would,
20th.
That's a little joint, so that would be with city council, right?
yeah, and that's already scheduled.
Okay. Because you mentioned pulling it in July. Possibility, would the June be a possibility for it?
The June 10th meeting,
Yeah.
not for the May 20th
Okay.
stuff. The May 20th stuff's kind of locked in at this point. That said, I'd be more than happy to send the materials to anybody that can attend May 20th. And then if, like Commissioner Crosby,
Yeah, I
could
definitely
send,
want to get the materials. I
Yeah.
think that I'm driving that day.
so I can definitely send you the materials and
Mhm.
seek your input. I think I'll have the materials by May 10th. So I could probably send them over to you as early as May 10th,
Sure.
and then you could look at it and give us feedback by May 20th before you leave.
Mhm.
Well,
Well, I leave on the 9th, so.
oh, never mind that. I mean, we'll also, just keep in mind, also, we'll be working on it too, so if the comments were to come in a few weeks after May 20th, that'd be fine as well.
Is that the only comprehensive plan presentation at this point?
So what we kind of have tentatively scheduled is that will be the main one. And then depending on what edits and what different things are requested to be modified, then we're likely to come back with one more joint work session in July to kind of make sure that we did the edits in accordance with what's been requested. And then we'd be proceeding to, or moving to like the planning commission hearing either in July or August, and then the council meeting right after.
Okay.
We just want to make sure when we bring it for the hearings that the document's 99% of the way there, so we don't have to pump the brakes on the hearings. So there probably will be two opportunities with them, would be my guess.
Okay.
And then other than that, Chair, I just made some updates. There was an update to the moratorium, which I believe you probably saw. I sent it out last Friday on April 19th.
Mhm.
So that when I published this report, I didn't have that to update you on yet, but that's another update. And then that will be going before the council in the next, I think on June 3rd for a hearing. For a revision to the moratorium.
Is there any update on when we might just be out of it altogether, or is it going to be a few years once it actually gets all done with the upgrades?
Yeah, it's a little more nuanced than that. So the negotiations that have been going on for the last 6 months have provided us 270 more ERUs over what we currently had, which was 300 as of last June. What it also does is because we have enough ERUs basically to cover everything that's already been approved in the pipeline. So if everything gets ERU allotments and everything moves forward, then it's going to be probably at least a year or two before we have more capacity. However, if some things don't move forward or some people don't request allotments, which I think is a real possibility,
Right.
then we'll have some more capacity to somehow distribute in the next, I don't know, probably 3 to 6 months. With part of what I can say is with part of the negotiations, as I said in the email on April 19th, is that the negotiations with EPA and DEQ did also say there's an additional 190 ERUs that we can get if we do some other things to the treatment system. And I'm not an engineer, so I don't exactly know what those things are. I've read them. They don't mean a
Do
ton
the
to
things
me.
works for me.
Yeah, so it's like, okay, other people will figure this out. But to even do that, it's probably, I don't know, somewhere between a year or two, from my understanding. So I think there's like two avenues, right? There's either we allocate ERUs to a bunch of development, but some of the developments don't move forward, and then we can redistribute those ERUs. And then the other avenue is that after some of these sanitary sewer system improvements are done, then per this negotiation we just finished, the EPA will grant us another 190 ERUs. And why the numbers kind of are where they are, 570 plus 190 is 760. And 760 is what the city's stress test report said we could take. So our stance and our belief is still that we can adequately process the effluent from 760 more ERUs. The EPA and DEQ weren't comfortable going that far, so I wouldn't say met us in the middle, but they gave us 570 conditional, the other 190 based on some more improvements. So that's kind of where we sit today.
Okay.
Anything else from any of the other commissioners? If you want to bring up. Right, we'll go ahead and move on to new business then tonight, which is going to be our legislative public hearing on the land use approval extension ordinance. Let's see here. So let's go ahead and open that public hearing at 6:46. Let me scroll down here and find that file number for everyone. Make it official.
Oh, I have a file number.
It's 24-020 DCA.
44-20 DC. Excellent. All right. That was at 6:46. And at this time, we'll call for any abstentions from the hearing body. Any conflicts of interest from the hearing body? Seeing none, we'll move into the staff report.
Okay, something going on with this. Having a lot of technical difficulties tonight. I don't know if it's me or what. Okay, let's see here. Sorry, it's just my computer is not. There we go. Okay, so can everybody at home see that? See the screen there?
We flick it here.
Okay, so this is for file 24-020 DCA. So this is a legislative hearing. So I'll just jump right into it. The main reasons are related to the subject matter that we were just talking about. Since adoption of the first moratorium on October 3rd, 2022, there's been some uncertainty around whether development applications can move forward or not, because of the sanitary sewer moratorium that was put into effect on that date. Because of that, several developments haven't been able to move forward, mainly because of financial lending concerns. So I know that there's at least probably 2 or 3 developers that have been unable to get full lending for their developments because we haven't been able to allocate ERUs essentially. With the additional 270 ERUs that were granted by EPA and DEQ, the city, with the draft resolution that I shared on April 19th with the commission, council, and the entirety of the development community, we now have enough ERUs to do some ERU allotments to developments that were submitted and approved prior to the moratorium going into effect in October of 2022. And staff believes that doing an extension ordinance for those land use approvals is the most equitable and just way to help them move those projects forward. There are a few developments that, because they couldn't get financing, they've basically been on pause the entire time since October 2022. So for about 1.5 years now. So now with hopefully what will be adopted with the new resolution in June, staff anticipates that will kind of be able to, a few of these developments will finally be able to move forward to the next phase of financing. So that's kind of the justification for the ordinance. It's to give more time basically for these people to achieve financing and move forward with construction. What it's not doing, a few things. The extension would not be applicable to any land use applications that have been submitted since October 3rd, 2022. Most of those applications have not been related to what I would call new development. It's more of things like type 1 design reviews, some modifications to existing buildings. We've had a lot of replats, tree permits, stuff like that. So it wouldn't be applicable to any of that. There was one application that did have a second sewer connection through a design review, but that's only because they had a house fire. And when they decided to rebuild, they turned it into a duplex instead of a single family home, which they could do. However, that application, this wouldn't apply to. Also, they've already pulled a building permit to build the duplex, so they wouldn't need an extension anyways. The other thing it does not do is give automatic approval. The developers or the applicants still have to go through a type 1 review process in line with the Sandy Municipal Code section 171210. As long as they can meet that process and what's outlined in the ordinance before you tonight, then they will be approved for an extension. Just to give a little bit of background on the notice. Notice was sent to DLCD in accordance with state statute at least 35 days before the first hearing, which is tonight. So that was sent to the state on March 6th. We also sent an email notice to all developers that this ordinance could be affecting on April 4th, letting them know of the hearing tonight and of the next hearing, and also providing them a copy of the draft ordinance. As I put on the slide here, that was not a requirement because it's a legislative hearing. However, I just felt like, again, it was the just and equitable thing to do to let them know that this is what we're planning to do. And to give them heads up. A legal notice was published in the Sandy Post a couple weeks ago, and then a Facebook notification was put on our Facebook page last week. Couple more things, and then I'm going to be done here. So we did receive 3 public comments, one of which from Next Adventure. DK Camp is the owner of Next Adventure. He sent his comment letter in early enough to make it into the packet, so that's in the packet. And he supports the ordinance. Margot Clinton, on behalf of SGS Development and Sandy Woods 2, which is up by Kelso Road, that's a 43 lot subdivision. They submitted theirs after publication of the packet, but I did forward it to all the commissions, so you should have that in front of you in your email. And Margot also supports the ordinance. And then we got a third public comment, same thing as Margot's. It was submitted after publication of the staff report, but I did forward it to you in an email. So that's before you as well. That's from Garrett Stephenson with Schwab Williamson and Wyatt, which is an attorney, which is a firm out of Portland. They've been pretty active in Sandy the last 5-6 years. He is representing Bull Run Terrace, which is on the east end of town where DeBarco Road will eventually intersect with Highway 26. This was also known as Deer Point, Vista Loop South. It's that subdivision's had a lot of different names over the years. Mr. Stephenson also supports the ordinance. However, he's requested a few modifications to the ordinance. He has said that he believes that those modifications are needed for clear and objective purposes. Our attorney could speak to that. I did speak to our attorney, Mr. Soper, who's on the line tonight, so he can, if you have more questions, he could answer those. But he said that he doesn't believe those modifications that are being requested are needed and are necessary. However, he also doesn't see an issue with adding them into the ordinance if the planning commission and city council feel like they want to. The second thing that Mr. Simonson requested is changing the extension from 1 year to 2 years. So right now in the draft ordinance, if they apply and they're granted approval by Patrick and myself, then they have 1 additional year for their deadline, in addition to anything that's already in the development code. What he's asking is for that to be, instead of 1 year, to be 2 years. So I don't really have a strong feeling about that. I think 1 year for most projects will probably be sufficient. However, like something like Bull Run Terrace, it's such a large project. I don't know, maybe they do need the 2 years. But I'll leave that to you guys to talk about and decide. So with that, our recommendation is the planning commission to review the ordinance and the findings, take public testimony, and then provide a recommendation to the city council, which has a meeting to discuss this on May 20th.
Good, thank you, Kelly. We'll move into, excuse me, public testimony. For those who wish to speak, please try and avoid repetition. If somebody else has already expressed the same thoughts, it's sufficient to state that you agree with the statements of the previous speaker, even if that's all you say. If you have anything to submit, like documents, maps, or letters that you wish to be considered by the hearing body, they must be formally placed in the record of the proceeding. To do that, you can either email before or after you speak your materials to planning@cai.sandy.or.us, and staff will make sure it gets put in properly. We will call for testimony for this public hearing in 3 groups. First, in favor of the proposal, then testimony opposed to the proposal, and finally neutral testimony. If you're participating online, please click the raised hand button at the appropriate time and wait to be recognized. If you're participating via the telephone, dial *9 to raise your hand at the appropriate time and wait to be recognized. First group that we'll call on tonight is the group in favor of the proposal. We will give 3 minutes for folks if there's anybody who's wished to testify.
Yep, see one. Oh, There was a hand raised and it was lowered. Oh, there it is. Okay, this is from Mr. Vandehey. Dave, there you go. You got it.
Okay, can you guys hear me?
We can. Thank you very much. Go ahead. You have 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Chair Wagner and the commissioners. Kelly did a good job of kind of summarizing our support. But I just wanted to add that we greatly appreciate staff recommendation that pending projects be allowed an additional extension. As you know, we submitted a letter of support on Thursday, which has been forwarded to you. And just to kind of summarize, obviously the challenge, as Kelly pointed out, is obtaining financing for projects of this size that have a moratorium in place has been difficult. And I know that there's some work on a moratorium resolution that I haven't gone through completely, but looks very promising as well. And that might, and I'm hoping likely will improve our situation in regards to financing, but that is the challenge at the moment. Also, as Kelly pointed out, we have recommended a couple of modifications to what was presented. The 2-year extension instead of 1 year. We might find ourselves in a bit of a unique situation than others potentially, in that our project originated essentially in 2019. And it's my understanding that as of May, I believe, of 2022, the approval timeline for projects from that day forward is 2 years, with then an additional year extension potentially available upon staff's approval. With ours originating back in 2019, it was just 1 year with then that potential additional extension. Our 1 year had already expired at the end of December. And so we've already asked for and been granted that additional year, which gets us till the end of this year. But we're already in March. Time just flies. So that's really the premise for our request, for it to be a 2-year extension versus a 1-year extension. And then, as Ken also pointed out, there was some recommendations from our attorney in regards to some minor revisions to make it more clear and objective. So it sounds like the city's attorney has reviewed that as well. Again, thank you very much for the staff recommendation. This is going to be very helpful. And we definitely recommend that the planning commission adopt the ordinance requesting these 2 additional revisions. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate the testimony. Anybody else who would like to testify in favor of the proposal? I see no more hands. We'll move on to testimony against the proposal. Again, click the raised hand button if you're interested in testifying. All right, and seeing nobody in that group, we'll move to neutral testimony, if anybody would like to testify. Great, seeing none again, we'll move on to a call for staff recap and recommendation.
Yeah, so I don't feel very strongly one way or the other about the modifications that were presented by Dave's attorney. And then as far as 1 or 2 years, I don't really have a super strong opinion about that either. So, but I would recommend thinking about those 2 items and anything else that the commission might be thinking about coming into the meeting, discuss those and then forward a recommendation.
Perfect, thank you. Then I guess I'm looking for a motion to close the public hearing if we're ready to do that.
I move we close the public hearing.
I second.
All right, we have a motion to close the public hearing in a second. All in favor, say aye or give it a thumbs up.
Aye.
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 All opposed? All right, motion passes. All right, discussion time. What's everybody thinking?
I had one question. When you review the approval, for the approval, you know, the request for the extension, what would you be reviewing that hasn't already been approved when it came before the planning commission? I mean, what,
Not a lot. It would be mainly looking at have they already exhausted their other extensions? Do they meet the requirement that they were a land use application that was submitted prior to October 3rd, 2022? And then in the approval, we'd be issuing a new year and new date. So it's probably gonna be like a page long. A little bit of analysis with basically something in writing and a signature saying, here's your new deadline.
okay,
How many times can a developer ask for a 1-year extension? Is there a limit? I know there's a
So-
fee. It looked like there was a $530 fee. But if they've got millions of dollars on the line, 530 is a drop in the bucket.
Yeah. So Dave's testimony was correct. Theirs is kind of unique in that there might be one or two other land use applications. I'm not sure. But they are old enough that the extensions that were, or the deadlines that were in the development code at the time were exactly like you said. It was like a year to record the plat, which I think I've seen like one subdivision ever meet that. And then it was the developer or my position could grant a 1-year extension to that. Since we've changed it, so it's 2 years. And then the director can grant another 1-year extension. So now they have 3 years instead of 2. And then in the proposed ordinance, it'd just be 1-year extension. There is the possibility that we could come back through with this ordinance again a year from now and look to re-adopt it for another year so they could apply another year. I don't know how that would impact a developer like Bull Run Terrace though, because they're, who's doing the financing might want more time upfront. A development of that size, it's gonna be, even if they started tomorrow, it's gonna be very difficult probably to record the plat. So they have about 7 months left. So they would have to record or present the plat to be recorded to me in about 19 months. It's probably gonna be pretty tight. I'll just be honest. There's a lot that goes into creating a subdivision. Especially one that is gonna be the size of that one, with road improvements that intersect with an ODOT facility. It's gonna be a tricky project. It's gonna be a very time consuming project. Most developers, they will put together their construction plans, will go through many iterations of review with them on that, with their engineers. That probably takes about 4 to 6 months on average. Then they will take those construction plans, put it out to bid, hire a contractor, and then to actually install the public improvements takes well over a year most of the time. So I do see Dave's concern that 19 months is going to be a very tight timeline.
now are the ERUs doled out as they're connected? Or if somebody had an approved development for, let's say, 100 units, and they say, we're gonna go, do you give them 100? Or are they doled out as they make those connections?
So how we've been doing it since October of 2022 is the ERU is given when they pick up and we issue the building permit. So
The
when
number
they,
that they expect,
what's that?
for the number of ERUs they expect.
Well, for the number of ERUs that the project's necessitating, so
Okay.
most of the time, a builder will come in, they have a building permit in our office for like a month. We've reviewed everything, it's now ready to be issued. When they come in and we issue the permit, they pay all their SDCs at that time. And when they pay their SDC, that's the trigger for giving them an ERU. And that's how we've been doing it for the last year and a half.
And with the ERUs that we now have available, and assuming that, you know, that passes, is that enough of a guarantee then for our folk, for the developers, banks to actually lend them the money to then need to go do that?
On a real small project, probably, but on a project the size of Dave's where they have. I don't know, 160 or so ERUs, probably not. So what the new resolution is. Proposing is an ERU allotment program. So Dave would, you know, in addition to this extension ordinance, he would come in with an application and say. This is how many ERUs we need allotted to our development based on the approval. We would then allot those ERUs to that development for a specified time period. And if they didn't fulfill.
Go
Pick
get
up
their
their
bank
permits, then we would either offer an extension. In this case, it might be needed, on smaller projects, probably not. And then after that, if they still didn't pick up the permits by that deadline, that allotment would go away.
Goes back into the pool.
Goes back into the pool, and at that point, that's when we could potentially. Start thinking about other development applications.
And that allotment would give them what they need then to get that bank funding,
Correct, it would give them all of the ERUs that we have,
the security,
correct.
okay.
Do you happen to know of all the approved development applications now, how many ERUs they represent approximately?
About 520.
Okay, so we're really close.
We're right there.
But I was just
If I,
wondering,
but that is assuming everything moves forward.
right. I was
So,
just thinking if you had 700, then it's possible somebody could be working on a project and somebody else could jump in and grab.
But we're
more.
not taking any new applications right now. are we?
No, but somebody, if you
Yeah.
had 700 that are already approved,
Right,
but we only have 540 to give out, then it's a race.
so. That was, I mean, I'll be very honest, that was what the big concern was when we first had the moratorium, right? We had 500+ ERUs that we had approved through land use submissions. And the EPA gave us 120. Luckily, I mean, I'll just be honest, luckily. Interest rates went way up. So the demand to build went way down. It's just lucky timing, really. And then since then, we went from 120 to 300, and now we bumped from 300 to 570, so. And finally, we're at a place finally, after a year and a half of, we can cover everything that's been approved.
But to me, that would say we've removed one of the big roadblocks to funding
Mhm.
with the financing.
Once that resolution's adopted, correct?
Right,
Right now, though, what's officially on the books is. A resolution that has 300 ERUs with 45 of them used up. So
yeah.
right now we have, for a lender,
Mhm.
we have 255 ERUs left.
Right.
and no allocation process,
Correct. Which brings a lot of uncertainty.
right?
But with the passing of the resolution that we're looking at, it would, like say, would remove that roadblock.
The moratorium,
No, it
Or
would
this
remove
ordinance.
the roadblock for financing.
I think to remove the roadblock, you'll need, it's gonna be the two prongs. You'll need both of this ordinance to extend deadlines, and you'll also
Right.
need the allotment through the new moratorium. But yes, I agree with you. And that's our hope. This entire, that's why we're pursuing everything kind of at the same time, and why we're coming up with this ordinance and an ERU allotment. Is we're hoping that will provide lenders enough assurance that then they'll lend on all these projects that are approved.
All right, so just kind of making our way through here, so 1 year versus 2 years, kind of seeing where people at. personally, I'm not a huge fan of just creating longer extensions just to have longer extensions. I think it just allows for things to sit out there and legislation to change and things be open. That being said, I think because we're not likely to bring in any new building developments in the next year or two anyways, it's just the ones that we have in front of us, and I don't see those having a whole lot of change personally. So I'm kind of neutral on the 1 year versus 2 years in this particular case, although I'm usually against anybody else.
I'm kind of the same place. It doesn't. Trying to think of a downside of going with 2. It does give more assurance. I mean, it extends the assurance that you're not.
It also could create a lapse in urgency though as well, which will tie up other things. I mean, if you. I'm kind of against the 2 years. If they can apply for an extension and then another one, things could change a whole lot.
But would they be able to apply for another extension, Kelly? Because they've already had their one.
No, they would just.
We'd have to
It's just
redo
the one.
this.
We'd have to renew this particular one for an additional year.
But if we came back and redid this again and decided that, oh. An extension for an extension instead of handing out the 2 years.
There is another option I thought about earlier today, if you want to hear it, or I.
I'd love to with that smile on your
Or,
face.
or I could just not mention it. It's up to you guys.
No, let's
entirely.
hear
A
it,
year and a
'cause we're
half.
kind of all different. I
No, it
think.
wasn't, no, it was. And I have not talked to our attorney about this, so Josh, my apologies. But you potentially, and this will have to be obviously vetted by our attorney's office and everything, but. You could potentially have something where. It's for 1 year, although there could be in the ordinance a second year granted. Based off of some criterion that we would come up with.
For instance, a bank's financial need, say that they need 2
A
years. or
bank's
something.
financial, yes, in writing from the bank
Right.
institution. It wouldn't be a developer or builder just saying, oh, well, my bank's telling me I need to. It
Right,
would be something in writing from a bank, yes,
a lender,
A lender.
insurance.
correct.
Some kind of person, okay.
I don't know if Josh wants to speak to that. Again, I haven't read it, I just thought of it like 4 or 5 hours ago, so.
Well, we're spitballing that. Could it be something that we specify is at your review only, or would that be something we need to also still bring to the planning commission?
I think it could be either.
If it was spelled out clearly in the ordinance, what that second extension of the criteria was, then it probably wouldn't have to come back to us.
I think that should be the goal, if that's what we're looking at.
Josh?
Yeah, so it would have to be clear and objective regardless, because it could apply to housing. It's difficult to craft language like that on the fly during a planning commission meeting. So one idea would be perhaps that you could, because as I understand the process and the timeline here, forward a recommendation of approval to city council with the recommendation that they add an opportunity for a 1-year extension based on some criteria like that. And then Kelly and I can, in the meantime, put together some language for what that could look like to take to council.
Thank you, Josh. I didn't mean to put you on the spot. It was just, this whole thing is new to everybody, this whole moratorium, everything, the RU allotments, everything. And I was kind of thinking about this based on their letter earlier today, and I did think, well, there's probably a lot of different things like that we could do.
Yeah.
But that was just the one that came to my mind.
Is it also possible that we could make a statement to the effect of for things that came in prior to this date, they would have 2 years?
Potentially, although I think,
How would you pick the date?
yeah, I don't know what date we
Yeah.
pick. There is the potential also that maybe larger projects, so it would have to be a ERU number probably would have a longer period than small projects. Again, I don't know if that would work or not, but that's just something else you could potentially consider. Because a 20 lot subdivision doesn't have the same time period as a subdivision with 198 housing units. It just doesn't.
Actually, like that idea, I think a little bit better. Just based off of what you were saying earlier about timetables for larger subdivisions, working with ODOT and all those other pieces that go into it. I think that actually the complexity and the size makes a lot more sense than than just the lending, let's say.
Do you have any thoughts on that, Josh? Sorry, I'm just coming up with different ideas while we're talking here.
That's the point. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think the difficulty is in nailing down the specifics of that, but I think the concept could work.
What would be the potential for developers coming, overstating what they're wanting? Applying for the permit, getting the extension for 2 years, and then going, oh, wait, we're gonna scale back a whole bunch, which is then tied up all that process. It just seems like there's a lot of gray area that could shift.
Yeah,
unless-
it's a good point. So you'd have to have something in the ordinance about for the second year, if you would not be able to do a modification to your approval.
Right, that's what I'm,
Yeah,
that's,
The intent is really about extending the time for you to get things done versus.
As was approved.
cooking up more
Right.
stuff if the moratorium ends, and then you decide you wanna add 80 more whatevers, or. It just seems really open for a lot of loopholes to be gone through.
yeah, I will be clear, like the more nuance that you put in, like the more different scenarios you put into it, like I'm trying to bring up here, the more potential you have for something that was unintended.
Right,
Uh,
yeah,
But I'm just trying to think of different flexible things to grant a longer extension for projects that really need it.
Dave was not happy with our clear and objective. He questioned our clear and objective. And I don't know that how the changes we've talked about would be clear and objective and pertain to where we can enforce those or make sure everybody was following the same set of standards.
That would be for Josh and Kelly to work out in the next couple weeks.
That's my concern.
Yeah, I'd be comfortable with the suggestion of forwarding it with Josh and Kelly getting together to write up a criteria for an additional extension. And I'm comfortable with, not having to see it. It's gonna go to city council, and if I want to be there at the meeting, I could, but, for testimony, but
So what you're saying is automatic 1 year, they don't automatically get a second year, they still have to show a need, whether it be size,
right.
loan. Some kind of criteria, they'd still have to apply for
Yeah,
that
it's
second
similar,
year.
like what I asked him, what he looks at for this initial one. There would be kind of some new things that would be added to it. That would be,
The bank's not gonna write a check if you guys don't let us do
So,
this.
all right, so just to kind of help Kelly out, I think a little bit, so I think the lender is pretty straightforward, letter from the lender. on size or scope, what are some definitions that or parameters that we can give Kelly that we think are appropriate?
I'd say no alterations to the
Yeah,
original approval.
So what,
although could they come back at us and go, well, we don't agree with this, the tree ordinance or the lighting ordinance, so everything is locked in. And they can't go, well, the parking space is 1 foot, the blah, blah, blah,
No.
or we want a different size wall. I mean,
Well,
we
they
come
would have
across
to
that a
come
bunch.
back for a variance.
They'd have to come back for a variance,
afterwards.
but could
That's-
that variance be an excuse for an extension? I guess is what I'm looking at is all the little ways someone could manipulate.
my question then would be, in that situation, how does that apply now? If somebody's already at the end of their 1 year, and they decide to make a modification, what does that do currently?
I don't know. The modification to like something like Bull Run Terrace would have to come back before the city council. I believe, because isn't that who finally approved it? Yeah,
They appeal.
So, I mean, it's
so I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
theoretically, that all has to still be wrapped up within their normal timeline though, right?
Correct, yeah.
Because a modification doesn't necessarily give them an extension, does it?
No, unless in the modification order, we write that in there.
Right.
So, yeah. They would also be depending on the city council to approve the modification.
Sure.
So in a clear and objective manner, if the city council decided to deny the modification, there'd be obviously no extension or change to the deadline then, you know. I don't know, that could get real tricky. I don't know if I will have a good answer for you right now.
Well, I mean, we have. What, how many total subdevelopment applications that we're looking at?
I don't know the number of applications. I know it's 520 ARUs. Of which Bull Run Terrace is probably like over a fourth of those. I can tell you what Bull Run Terrace is. It's 190 apartments. Yeah, 190 apartments times 0.7. Plus 8 plus 1 or 2 for the commercial, so at least 142 ARUs. So yeah, that's over a fourth.
Yeah.
It's 27% of our areas.
What would be kind of an ERU or size of a project that you think would need more time? What's kind of that? Is there a threshold there that you see?
Not really. I mean, usually the larger the development, the longer it takes. However, I will say that there's a lot of other factors in that, as far as like a big one, which a lot of people overlook, is the competency and level of background that the project manager has. Honestly, I've seen projects take a year that with other project managers took 3 years.
Sure,
For the same
applies
project.
kind of across the board to a lot of projects. Yeah,
I think anything over like 30 or 40 ERUs, I would consider to be a larger project. Anything under like 30, I would consider to be a smaller project. And that's not really based on anything except like experience and processing applications and seeing how long it takes for them to proceed. Although like the Foothills Apartments, which was like 70 apartment units, that went up quick. So I mean, I don't know, it all varies.
I think Sandy Place went up fairly quickly
It did.
too. They went up
It
really
did.
fast.
And that, I'll just be very honest, that was a very competent, experienced firm that put that together, INE. And so they were used to building large apartment complexes.
Okay.
all right, so I think any other kind of criteria that we would want to consider for that second year. I think it sounds like looking at everybody, we're kind of right in that same area. Any other criteria that you'd want added?
Yeah, which would be the lending issue.
That's one, the
and-
size and
and that it's
complexity.
not altered.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, moving then past the 1 year, 2 year, I think anything else, I think there was the clear and objective piece that was brought up, although, our city attorney had mentioned that we should be good to go there. Also, I think we're gonna be adding some new language anyways. So it'll get a second pass. Anything else that folks want to bring up, before I look for a motion? All right, then, if somebody wants to give it a try, I'm open to hearing a motion.
Hmm. What was the file number again? I didn't off here.
24-020 DCA.
DPA.
DCA.
Okay, let's try this. I would make a motion that we forward the ordinance onto city council for their approval with the addition of staff and the attorney creating text that would allow for a second 1 year extension based on lending, a letter from a lending institution. I believe we said that, or
Stating the need.
or, something, a lending issue. And that the development would not be altered in any way as part of that extension. And to let them figure out that wording and get that into what goes before city council. Did that cover it?
Complexity? Would complexity factor into your motion?
Well, it could, but we were talking about
For like larger projects?
right, would it be only, is that what you're talking about? Only for?
That would be a condition in which they could apply for the second.
Okay, yeah, I mean, that would be a third. It's the word I want, is the criteria, but it's a deciding point whether you could get that extension would be the size of the development. And that number, we can leave it to staff to figure out.
All right,
So it'd be those three things.
all right, we have a motion.
I will second the motion.
All right, and seconded. Let's see here, all in favor? Go ahead and say aye, and then do it,
Aye.
opposed? All right, that's unanimously passed, 7:30. Excellent. All right, moving right along here. We are now moving into our work session, sign code modification. I believe, is that Kelly or?
Yeah, I'll be presenting it to you here. I don't know what it's, like I said, I'm having some issues tonight. I don't know what's going on here. Oh, boy.
I believe it's
Okay, there we go.
those following along at home, number page 15 in the packet.
Okay, let me just get to it. Hold on one second. Okay. So I've kind of toyed around with how to do this tonight. It's quite a bit of text amendments.
I'll just read the whole way.
It's only 50 pages.
Way better than last time.
Yeah,
That's right.
so, yeah, that's true. The 300 and some pages.
Yeah.
So this is a text amendment that we have not revised the sign code from my understanding since the first year I worked with the city, which was in 2011. I believe the chapter says it was effective on October 19th, 2011. I honestly haven't researched what that change was. I think it might have been something to A-frame signs.
Hmm.
But that's the last time anything's been modified in this chapter. So we've been operating under the current sign code for, what is that, about 12 and a half years now. I've heard since I became the director in 2017, at the time, I told my staff at the time, that's a lot different than my current staff, but what code chapters they would like to see amended the most. At the time, and I think it's still probably the same for a few staff members, is the sign code was the top thing that people wanted to modify. So we actually began working on these modifications all the way back in 2017. We worked closely with the city attorney's office. At the time, it was David Dukeman that I know you remember, Commissioner Crosby. He was the city attorney, I believe. He's still at Barry Elser and Hammond. His roles changed, so now our attorney is Josh Soper, and it was Chris Crean for a while. But David was our attorney, I believe, for the better part of 17 or 18 years.
He was the city attorney when Jerry joined.
Oh, okay, so 20-something years.
Yes,
ago.
I remember he was one of the names that I saw in the
Wow.
minutes as I was looking back.
I remember Hammond himself
Yeah, Jack.
being in our meetings. Yeah.
So we worked with David, and then I think a little bit with some of the other attorneys over at Barry Elser and Hammond. One of the reasons I wanted to point that out is because Josh, who's on the line tonight, if any of these things are done properly, I want to make sure that you fully understand that I don't think he's had a chance to fully review the edits. It was done under other attorneys at the office. However, we worked pretty closely with them. So I feel pretty good that where we're at, it meets all the different legal standards that are before us today. It was then shelved in 2020 because of the pandemic and COVID. So we were actually going to bring it in a work session like mid 2020. That's when I was originally going to bring this. It's about 4 years ago. And then what happened is, we had different people come onto council, priorities shifted. We started the comp plan, the clear and objective audit, a lot of different things. So this thing was just basically put on the back burner for the last 4 years. And then I just started diving into it again about a month or two ago and made a few little tweaks, but overall it's pretty much the same it was from 4 years ago. The main thing we're trying to do with this are two things. The main thing is to get rid of illegal content. There's a ton of First Amendment violations in this code section. A lot of things in this code section, it basically even says you have to read the sign to then make a decision on whether it's complying with the code or not. That's not allowed. We can't, that's a freedom of speech issue. There's even some code sections, which I'll go over in a second here, that relate to what type of flags will allow people to put up. I think it even says like one state and one federal, the United States flag and the Oregon flag. Well, we can't do that either. So one of the places is flying the McDonald's flag right now. I won't name the business, but and that's fine. They have every right to do that under the First Amendment. The second main thing is that, and I think this is what my staff had a concern with, is that the code provisions currently are in some respects too burdensome, overly restrictive. It's really even hard to understand on a few of the sentences in there what we're even trying to regulate. So I have staff members that rightfully so don't really understand what it's trying to say. So that's the two big things that we're trying to change with this. I was going to just kind of go through the staff report and kind of hit some of the highlights. I wasn't going to read each one of these line by line.
Oh, come on. We have all night.
Well, if any questions you have,
I'm kidding.
feel free to interject. Oh, and one other thing I will mention is that I don't think the planning commission's ever reviewed the sign code before. It's outside of Title 17, so technically speaking, we don't have to bring this before you. However, I thought this was a really good opportunity to get, I want more eyes on this than less. So, and you guys are a very thoughtful group that will really dive into this hopefully and give us some input. So that's why I'm bringing it before you. But once we get input from you and you give a recommendation, then what it will do is it will be brought to city council for adoption. So it won't come before you for like a legislative hearing, just so you're aware. So to just kind of dive through this, we're adding a new section on director that just defines what the word director means throughout this chapter. I believe whoever wrote the sign code kind of made the assumption that if they use director, it would just automatically refer to Title 17. However, we think it's better to actually put it into this code section. Jumping into 153220, the staff, I'm recommending that it actually allows new internally illuminated signs again in the C1 zoning district. That was taken out 20-some years ago. Doesn't allow for like cabinet signs or anything like that. I'm proposing to add those back in.
Yeah, I didn't note on here. What was the intent behind that?
I think they felt like cabinet signs weren't classy enough looking from reading back through notes and everything, and they wanted them to be individual illuminated letters. That's like, that's neither here nor there. Like, people can feel that way, but what I will say is for a lot of small businesses, that's a lot more expensive to have those signs manufactured. So we've had a lot of requests, and unfortunately I've had to tell people, sorry, we can't allow that. And then what ends up happening is they put their banner sign out there and it stays up there until we do code enforcement on to bring it down. So trying to add a little more flexibility back into the code. It would still require for the background to be dark, which I think is the real intention. We also moved code language from 153270 on sign lighting up to section 153220. So if you see that in 3270, it's not deleted, it's just moved because we felt it all should be in the same section under sign lighting. The next one's an interesting one. We wanted to make it more clear how to complete the measurements. It's very unclear currently. The other bizarre thing, I'll just draw this, hopefully they see if I can change the camera view here real fast. Okay, so currently, just to explain to you what the staff and what applicants currently have to do. So you have a building like this, and it's multi-tenant. Currently and I have not been applying this since 2017, we've been very flexible. But how the sign code was done and how it's written is that this entire frontage, even though there's 3 tenant spaces here, this entire frontage cannot have more than 10% wall space. So if this guy comes in, puts a big sign, then these people are gonna, by the sign code, have to put up these little tiny signs that will not, for the whole frontage, exceed 10%. The other thing they have to do is this person has to figure out how big that sign is and do a bunch of math. It's crazy. I'll just be honest, it's crazy. So what we're trying to do is that each tenant space will have their separate 10%. And they just have to figure that out. The math will be easier. They're not relying on other people trying to hog up all the wall sign area. So that's kind of what the main thing on that is. Switch the camera view back. Okay. Projecting signs, I'm not going to go into that. That's just some clarification. Freestanding signs, the main thing there is if you look at the current code, there's freestanding signs and then integrated business signage. Well, the only way you can determine if something's an integrated business sign is if you read the content of the sign. To tell that there's multiple businesses in it. So we're taking most of that out. We're combining integrated business sign and freestanding signs into one more readable section without the First Amendment violations. For example, I know years ago, I'll just give one quick example on this. Years ago, where the scooters sign is, remember how it was one large sign? Well, more recently, I think it's T-Mobile want to come in and take up half of it. If you read the sign code strictly, they can't. because it's not an integrated business sign. However, that would be reading content to determine that there's two businesses up there now. So it's just getting rid of stuff like that. A-frame signs is one that I've kind of administratively changed with the approval of the city manager back in 2017. In 2017, we actually had a sign code or sign committee for A-frame signs. They only met, I think, like 4 times a year. So if you brought in an A-frame sign, you'd have to potentially wait several months to get it approved. We just now approve them at the front counter. So it's just making it consistent with our practice for the last 7 years. Electronic message signs, this has been a contentious thing since my tenure here. Right now, it says that the sign cannot change except for every 1 hour. So if you drive around town, a bunch of them are in violation of this right now, and that's because people have basically said to us, what's the point of even having these if I can't do it for more than 1 hour? So we've kind of been more lenient. What we're proposing is every 30 seconds. We don't want something where, like, I know there's a few places in Portland where they change rapidly or there's motion, like that big one on I-5 by Salem, it has like motion on it. We definitely don't want that.
There's one at Bridgeport too that's
Terrible,
terrible.
and it's a big distraction for
Oh,
drivers.
it lights up the whole parking lot at night.
Yeah. And so we're not proposing that, and we're not even proposing something that would change every 3 or 4 seconds. We're saying, you know, if you're out of light for 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes, it might have 4 different messages while you sit there. That's what we're proposing. Food cart signs, food carts weren't allowed in the code in 2011, so we're just basically bringing in some language on food cart signage. There's been a few food carts that wanted to cover basically the entire food cart and signage, and we've told them that it's not really fair to the brick and mortar businesses that a food cart can just have nothing but signage. So what we're proposing is 2 sides of the food cart could have signage for like their menus and everything. And then the other 2 sides cannot, 2 sides, I'm sorry. And then just like brick and mortar, they would not be able to have roof signs, temporary signs, or draping signs.
Sorry, just because you said it, that was a clarifying question. So menus would be included in their signs.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, again, for content reasons, we can't legislate
Sure.
what the sign says. Temporary signs, this is another one we've had a lot of challenges with over time. I think the main thing on this is we're changing it from 180 days to 120 days. 180 days, staff feels that it's not really temporary when you can have it up half the year. And I think even 120 is more than most jurisdictions allow. But
What's an example of one of those signs? Do you have an example?
like a for say like a sign that just says open house or new items or
Open to the
know,
public, that sort of
yeah.
thing.
And what we
Okay.
see too often, which is kind of unfortunate, but I think it's usually a financing thing, I think, is a new business will come in and they'll put up a temporary sign, like I said, and it'll just stay up until we
Right.
tell them that they have to come up with a permanent solution.
Right,
The 2 tricky things with temporary signs are election signage. So we do have a clause in there that says you have to have it down. I forget the exact amount of time. We can look at it if you want. But so it's hard to regulate election signage without just treating it like any other temporary sign because of content reasons. The other one is real estate signage. Really difficult. Because if somebody puts up a real estate sign, it is temporary signage. And I've had realtors that wanted to leave up their real estate sign for a year or 2. If we allow that, then every temporary sign has to be allowed to stay up for a year or 2. So it's a really tricky thing. I don't think anyone's really solved it in any jurisdictions I'm aware of. Typically with like a smaller real estate sign, we don't get complaints. So if they put it up and it stays up and it goes beyond the days by a month or 2, typically we don't get any complaints. We don't enforce it. And then usually the property sells and it gets taken down. We do get complaints when it's the really large, 30 or 40 square foot signs that sometimes they're not maintained very well and they stay up for a year, and for commercial real estate especially. So that's a tricky thing. I don't really have a good suggestion on it. Moving to so that previous section covered all signs in commercial and industrial zones. That's the main things we regulate. The next one's permanent signs allowed in residential zones. We just made a few modifications to that. I'm not gonna go into all that. I'm just trying to move down through here. So temporary signs for community events. In that section, we had to make a lot of amendments for First Amendment allowances. We also defined what community events are. So if you go down to that section, this is in section 1532-35. If you go down to that section, it actually calls out what are the community events in Sandy that can violate the sign code on a temporary basis. And those are Mountain Festival and Mountain Festival Parade, the City of Sandy 4th of July fireworks show, Winterfest and Christmas tree lighting, Summer Sounds and Starlight Cinema, and the Mountain Hood Farmers Market. So those are the only 5. If it's not one of those 5 events, a applicant could always bring it to the city council for approval, such as the Mountain Hood Farmers Market did in the past. But that's what we're proposing at this point for the community-wide events. 1532, I'm not gonna go into that. So moving down to 1532-50, about bottom of the second page. This is where it actually talks about flags that are limited to a national, state, and local government flag. So we're removing that language and just saying how many flags they can have, because that's all we can do by First Amendment. Yeah, we're changing some stuff where we'd have to actually enter private property to review the signs. We typically like to just do it from the right of way. There is a clarification in 1532-50J that window signage may not exceed 33% of a window. And the reason why we're proposing to add that is because otherwise it violates chapter 1790, which states that windows shall contain clear glass to allow views to interior activity or display areas. So you basically have a code section in 1790 that was added. And then in 2008 and in 2011, when they updated the sign code, they didn't rectify or make any modifications. So to make them kind of work in tandem.
Is that each window?
Correct. That'd be what that would be.
So if it was separated and the full frontage had 4 windows, they could do up to each.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what our intent was, yeah. We have had a few businesses, I think there's maybe one right now, I won't say who it is, but we're basically every window, the entire window is covered. And sometimes if it's like really cool paintings, it can be pretty nice.
Right.
But in this particular instance, it's somebody's sloppy handwriting and it really detracts from the building. So. I'm just trying to get through some of these that are just First Amendment violations mainly. On 1532-80 under prohibited signs, it's mainly removing First Amendment violations. Right now, if you were to put a bench, it just says you cannot promote a commercial advertisement. So again, a content issue. So we're just saying you can't have signs on benches. There's a weird thing in 1532-120 that says if a sign is installed without getting a sign permit, the fee is doubled. I don't know that we've ever done that. Most of the time when people put up signs without a permit, it's because they actually don't know that one's even needed. Like it's a new business owner, they've never had a business, they put the sign up, so I don't want to be overly punitive on that. The permit appeal in 1532-140, we're just trying to bring it in line with Title 17, since it's the same department doing both, so that appeals would be a 12-day period. Just kind of easy for staff to remember, the appeal period is the same. 1532-150, variances to standards. So this one's interesting. Similar to the A-frame signs, in 2017, when I became the director, there was actually a sign review committee for variance applications. I think the city was only processing one every year or two, so it was really hard to keep the variance committee members engaged. And When I had reached out to them after I became the director, I think half the people didn't live in town anymore and half of them kind of forgot they were ever appointed to the committee. Um, so it's again, another thing where we had talked internally with the city manager and we had decided at the time that if there was a variance request, we'd just bring it to city council. I think in the last 7 years, we've had, I think, a total of 4 or 5 sign variance requests, so it's about one every 18 months. And you just make it a council agenda item and you just bring it for their approval or denial. It's been very easy. Much easier than keeping a committee, a subcommittee ongoing. Periodic review in 1532-180, we don't feel that's necessary. We can do that at any time. The violation section, it's really old. We believe it's from when the sign code was first adopted. It basically just says violations of the sign code are $100 fine, which honestly doesn't deter anybody at this point. We've had a few people, okay, I'll pay the 100. Like, can I just keep it up indefinitely? And it's like, no, it's $100 each day that the violation exists. But instead of having the number in there, we're just going to reference the chapter 116 like all our other code chapters do. So if the council decides to change the fine amounts in 116, it automatically updates the sign code. The limitation of liability, I won't bore you with the details there, but that was some attorney stuff that they wanted added in there.
Sorry, Josh.
Well, it was actually removable, I think, for the most part, saying that we didn't need to have that limitation in there, but anyways, that was from the attorney's office. And then the last one was 1532-210. We actually added 13 additional definitions, mainly based on front counter staff members getting questions from the public over the last 6 or 7 years, or the last 13 years, I guess. And nobody really knowing what the word exactly meant or the definition. So we just added those definitions to the code. We also added some new pictures. So with that, that's kind of my overview. I was thinking about doing like a slideshow, but I thought I'll just kind of walk through this. So with that, that's the main modifications. If you guys have any questions, we can walk through anything, or looking forward to input if you have any input on it.
I mostly have just a few clarifying questions as we go through. I did too. You did too, all right. So I think we'll just kind of go maybe as normal and we'll work our way through it here. So just speak up as we hit the different pages if you have something to question or comment as we go through. So we get everybody on the same page. We're going to use the packet page number. That's the one in the square gray box in the bottom right hand corner. Just so we're all on the same page here. Get it, page, yep. And I think my first set of comments is on page 19, if anybody has anything before that.
No, some of mine I didn't put a page on, so more general. But some I do have, but nothing before 19.
All right. Kelly, my first is dealing with lighted signs within 100 feet of residential settings. Is this just, because this is just commercial industrial, so that would not apply to like neighborhood signs that are lit all the time, correct?
Yeah, this would just be for signs in commercial and industrial zones.
Okay. And then as much as I hate it, because I like big, bright, flashy signs, and I love the pictures of looking at old downtowns with the spinning signs and the flashing lights, and it makes me really happy. So I'm sad to kind of bring a few of these up. But in let's see, I think it's A3 there, bulbs not to exceed 25 watts. Wouldn't it make more sense to use something like nits or some other form of lumens or measurement, because a 25 watt LED bulb is going to be a whole lot brighter than a 25 watt incandescent.
Mhm.
Yeah, we can definitely add some more details to
Okay.
that. I didn't even really. Lighting is definitely not my expertise, so I'll be honest, so you're thinking nits, is that what the measurement for LED lights is?
I don't know. It's the
Okay.
measurement for like screen brightness.
Okay. We can look into it some more.
I don't know, lumens. I don't know.
Yeah, I think
Lumens.
they are, a light bulb is listed by lumens,
Yeah.
but I don't know the correlation.
So I think this standard was brought up from,
Previous,
it was brought up from, where's it at here, sorry. This was actually from the code already. It is in 153270 E is basically that entire section on lighting. So we had actually brought all that from that section up to this section. Because the problem is with currently how it's written, there's all these other lighting regulations. Kind of, I'll just say hidden in 153270
Mhm.
that people at the front counter and applicants don't read because it's not in the standards.
right in the same place, yeah.
So we just migrated it. We'd be happy to look at that further.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think in probably even, 5 years ago, it made complete sense to do that, but
Mhm.
And that section's probably 30 years old.
yeah.
That section in 70.
It was candlelight back then.
Yeah,
Lantern.
Let's see, my next one is on 21. Starting with 6 and marquee, canopy and awnings. And I don't know, I just got a little confused because it talks about projecting signs and then the size requirements, and then it kind of got to marquee, canopy or awning signs, and it didn't have any sort of mention or sign of size. And so I was curious, does the size still apply from the previous requirements, or because it feels like it's talking about something different? It's like you could do this or you could have a marquee sign.
Yeah, so it's projecting signs, which is like typically projecting signs usually is like the blade signs that you see.
Right,
The marquee signs is something more like you would see at like an old movie theater.
exactly.
Um,
Which would be, I mean, just to build one of those, you'd have to be kind of out of that size requirement, it feels like.
to justify, yeah, I'd say so, yeah.
And so, I mean, is that, and same with like even an awning that has some writing on it. So it feels like it shouldn't meet like it should have its own separate size requirements. I mean, personally, if somebody wanted to build a cool marquee in town, I'd be, all for it. I don't think it'll ever happen anymore, but sure. Because it's also, I think marquee would, to a large degree, almost have to be structural to support
It
the
would.
weight,
Yeah, definitely would.
So that's why what my other comment was whether or not it was then be covered as part of the specialty code, which is why it's not necessarily included with signs.
Yeah, so one thing is, two things, it could be projected into the right of way, as this says. So it wouldn't be able to be projected so much that it would go like beyond the walking surface area out into like the car travel area or like the parking area.
Right.
So that would kind of limit its size to some degree.
Yeah.
It also couldn't bump into like street trees and stuff like that. And then the other thing is, I think even more important, what you're saying is to actually support the weight of it, that's gonna do some limitations, I think, to the size of it.
So basically what it's saying is because of all these other factors, it doesn't necessarily, those will be kind of size limiting them in and of themselves.
I believe,
Okay.
but I've never
I mean,
processed the marquee sign.
I'm okay
so-
with it. I mean, if somebody wants to build a giant, like I said, giant marquee sign, but I think more importantly is some, I don't know, cheap awning sign or something like that,
Right. I'm just reading it again, sorry. I don't think we've ever processed anything under it that I'm aware of. I mean, it even says it's a building over the entrance to a theater, hotel, etc.
yeah.
I think, I think if somebody did do one, you would want to have enough flexibility where. Depending on the applicant, like a hotel, for instance,
Mhm.
it could come out a lot further than like a movie theater in our downtown or something like that.
Right, and it could cover a road pathway in a parking lot.
Like a parking lot, yeah. Yeah, I mean, we could definitely look into it more, although I will say the chances of getting an
I'm
application.
okay with it as is. I was just clarifying,
Yeah.
really to make, just for clarification is, do these other things apply? And if the answer is no, it's kind of stands on its own. I'm perfectly okay with it still.
My understanding is it would stand on its own.
Okay. That's really my question. I'm perfectly okay with
I
that.
mean, is that how you read it with our changes?
Yes, that's how but again, it was, 1 through 5 all talked about. One type of sign, and then 6 kind of just switched over all of a sudden, so.
Maybe it almost needs like something saying it does not have to adhere to the standards in 1 through 5.
Yeah, some.
Is that what you're kind of
like-
thinking?
Yeah,
Well, clearance, you might not wanna.
The clearance.
Yeah.
Oh, right, yeah, you're right.
And overall height. Might wanna.
Interesting. Well, what Patrick and I can do, if you're comfortable with it, is we can kind of look through those other ones and determine which ones we think it. Likely wouldn't apply to, but Patrick's right, like clearance, it should still have that.
hmm
Maybe
Yeah.
it's mainly square footage. Is that where you're gonna leaning towards?
I don't know, it'd be interesting to do a little bit more investigation on it, come back. This is just a work session, so
yeah.
we're gonna come back with something,
Probably not to the commission though, unless they want us to.
yeah.
Cause like I'd be okay with, like you said, it kind of projecting more than maybe 8 feet if. It's a hotel entranceway or, marquee. I mean, maybe not a big canopy like that, but a marquee I would be.
It'd be interesting to see some modern designs of what architects are calling a marquee. Where are they being used, what do they look like, and then you might be able to get some of your dimensions and so forth from those.
Or
They are historical
proportional
older
buildings.
things.
Yeah, well, we have a lot of
Yeah.
historical buildings in town.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd love to see, some of them restored to kind of include some signs like they used to have.
Yeah.
I think it would,
I don't know.
just by definition of marquee.
I think the only place putting them on is like casinos, I believe.
That's
Maybe
all
really
we need.
Maybe really fancy hotels probably have them, I bet.
Hey, we want a really fancy hotel there.
Four Seasons or something.
Yeah.
Something I can't afford to stand.
Or theater.
Yeah, theater is the traditional, got your name on the marquee.
Yeah. It's kind of an event space.
We can look at that one a little closer. I do agree, need some clarity on which ones above don't apply.
We need one for City Hall. You
Can I perk
know,
under it each day?
Yeah.
presenting planning commission.
Tonight.
Yeah. Flashes, but not too flashy, not too fast.
All right, anybody have anything? I think my next one's on 22.
Which section are we in now? My first section is 153206. I keep scrolling to find out where are we right now. I think that's further down.
Yeah, I think we're still in,
060.
yeah, we're still
Yeah.
in 20.
Okay.
20 is really the meat of the whole sign code. You're on 22? Sure.
Yeah, number 6 there, multiple frontages. Can you tell me what that means?
Yeah, it's when there's two streets.
Okay, what if there's 3 streets? So I'm thinking,
Yeah, it says tenant spaces located on sites with 2 or more frontages, so it could even be 4.
Right, we'll have total of 2 signs must be placed on frontages that parallel each other.
Yeah.
And in no instances be placed on frontages that intersect or perpendicular. I mean,
Let me get rid of my other one here. Yeah, so actually a really good example of this one is right across the street from us.
that's the one I had in mind, yeah.
Yeah, so. So, there's Pioneer. There's Proctor. There's Meinig and like on the name of the street behind it. We'll say street.
Bus station.
Might be revenue. No, that's not right. Anyways, and then here's the, I'm just gonna kind of draw it out here. Here's the building. Here's the driveway. Here's the driveway. Here's the driveway. So right now they only have one sign here. And then they have all their wall signs. This code saying you can have another sign right here, which they've never done on Pioneer. Because they're parallel to each other.
So they couldn't be on the 2 corners.
Yeah, the sign code saying they couldn't have one here and, the second one here.
Could they
Or
move
one
them?
back here?
Could they move them both to the corners though? Because like if you had
Oh, if they had one here
it
and
in
one
there,
here.
yeah.
Potentially, although we have the other code section which has the vision clearance triangles. Which is especially important here because you can make a left-hand turn without these cars stopping and on a red light. So you need to be able to see, which I think this sign's even almost in it, but it's not quite. Potentially they could have that, I don't know.
But that would, I mean, without that would still qualify because that wouldn't be perpendicular then.
Yeah, does it say perpendicular or parallel?
And in no
Parallel each other.
instance be placed on frontages that intersect perpendicular to each other.
Yeah. Oh, well, there you go. That would be the limitation on that.
So they could not be done like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay,
So they could be like this or like this. But they could not be here, here. Yeah. I mean, most blocks aren't like this.
Sure.
Usually it's,
I mean, theoretically, we
have
have a whole
frontage.
median full of them, but
yeah. I think it's just trying to limit the amount of signage to a certain degree. Because in addition to this, you can also have wall signs. And then you can also have A-frame signs. So once you start adding it all up, it can get pretty cluttery. I think that's the reason why we were kind of leaning in that direction.
thank you. Answer like food cart one. I'm thinking through the food cart side just a little bit more. I very much understand kind of the reasoning and kind of the equity piece of it compared to brick and mortar. It seems to me that they're in kind of a little bit more unique position, though, especially with their menus, in that in a lot of cases they're advertising their business name on 1 or 2 sides of the cart with the traffic, same way a business would, on 1 or 2 sides. And then the other side is really interfacing with the customer, which is the menu piece, right? Which in a brick and mortar store would be done inside the business. And so to me, they're kind of at a disadvantage that they don't have that inside the business piece. And that all the signage that a normal business would have inside, they don't get to take advantage of. So, but with not being able to look at the side of them very also conflicted because like you said, I don't want just food carts wrapped in signage as well. So again, if anybody has anything on that, otherwise I'll move on. 4B there, signs that project, drape, or hang from awnings, shall be. Never mind, I guess no question.
Those are, yeah, prohibited. Yeah.
Um,
We had a few that were trying to hang signs off the awnings and it looked really tacky.
Yeah. I think I'm in temporary signs now. Community events kind of answered most of my questions with this when I got to that section, but I'm thinking of just the number of signs, and I'm thinking of, I don't know, parking lot events that aren't necessarily community events, but they come with different signages. You know, I've worked at businesses seeing, you know, G.I. Joe's used to have their parking lot event, the pet adoption events that I've seen, folks just setting up, you know, I've seen the phone business in town set up a pop-up tent, or the bank, or, you know, somebody along those lines just setting up for the day or the weekend, advertising their piece. So they would just essentially have to come in and get an exception, not even just a permit for some of these signs, but they'd have to get an exception to have, you know, a couple of banners kind of put up in their pop-up tent, 'cause that pop-up tent could be a sign.
Yeah, I mean, typically the ones that are done like for one day, especially on
Chip
a
repair,
weekend,
windshield chip repair.
people don't even contact us, they just do it. But
Yeah.
and that's pretty typical. They can also get a temporary use permit, is what they're supposed to do.
But would that overrule these, or I guess would that would then consider them a community event?
No, I'd consider them a business.
Right,
And
but
they can have
then,
temporary sign associated with it. Oh, you mean for multiple signs?
right, let's say they wanted, you know, or the car dealer is having a car show, right? And so they put up, you know, a bunch of banners and fun flags and, you know, those types of things.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I don't really want to see a lot of that personally. But that's just my personal feeling. I think it brings too much like 82nd Avenue potential.
Sure.
And then I think it becomes really hard to distinguish whether it's a one-day event or then it becomes like 2 weeks. I think that's where it gets really tricky.
Yeah,
It's like distinguishing what events we want to allow that for and which ones not. And I think that's why the community event thing was created at one point.
yeah, it's.
So then the council could bless it or not.
Yeah, and I think that's really the thing is, and I'm, you know, more the bigger events, you know, that fundraiser car show that happens, or, you know, whatever else that shows up, but I guess those theoretically could be big enough for.
So 2 things on that. The temporary signs are free. It's just an online form that you fill out. But they're free. We don't charge for them. And with something like that, you could have your one temporary sign for the actual location, some big banner, you know, 32 square feet. But then it doesn't stop you from then putting it in other locations on town. As long as you get property under consent and they don't already have another temporary sign. Yeah, but it's a tough one. I know what you're saying. It's just really hard to define.
Right,
We
and
want to let this for.
to make the ones you want okay, that are just,
know.
and then the others, yeah.
And then you have like when you enter Gresham, some days there's like. Those people with all like the stuff that they have for sale. In the Fred Meyer parking lot or by that bank there, and it just, to me, it looks junky.
Right.
Yeah,
No, I'm thinking more the fun things that we want, the events that we want to bring to town, right? Those,
Right.
you know, those different types of things that, you know, are attractions for our community. That's kind of really more what I had in mind.
Well,
Actually, speaking of,
Some
uh,
signs, though, you're only allowing one per business. You couldn't put one on property that that business isn't located.
You can because it's content based. So if, we've had this actually happen, so if the car dealership wanted to put a temporary sign on a downtown restaurant, as long as they meet these requirements, then you can do it, because we can't determine what the language is, like, because of First Amendment violations.
Hmm.
So yeah, it
So
does
is-
say that,
Is
but
allowed per business, so they could do it. They could do it at the car dealership, at the restaurant, and at the gas station.
correct.
Even
As
though it
long
says
as-
allowed one per business.
Yeah, that's one per business per location. So it's, like the gas station, if they already had a temporary sign up, they couldn't allow the car dealership to put up a second one.
And you sure that there's a legal issue with that? Because now you're saying you could have 3 of those signs for 120 days? That doesn't seem,
You can definitely do that. Yeah,
you
you
want to have that.
could put a temporary sign up at every location in Sandy with, you know, Kelly's the best or something. If I can
Challenge
convince
accepted.
everybody to do that and apply for temporary sign permits, there's nothing legally stopping me from doing that.
And that's a free speech
Yeah,
thing.
that's a free speech thing.
But but what you said though, pointing out that the wording, one per business. I see what you're saying, that if you added the phrase per location, right? That's not.
Attached to a building is allowed per business.
Yeah, so each business, and it's important to have per business because, let's go back to this example. You got 4 businesses in here. You have Mount Mocha. You have the dog groomer or the dog people. You have the gym. And you have the physical therapy place. So each one of these businesses can have a temporary sign. Now, each one of these businesses can choose, and in most cases, they would choose to advertise for their business. But if Mount Mocha wanted to advertise for the gym and the dog care place wanted to advertise for the gym, they all could have temporary signs for the gym. And because of First Amendment protections, there's nothing we can do about that.
But could you have a temporary sign someplace else in the city?
Yes, because of First Amendment reasons.
So that would be more than one per business.
no, because each business can still only have one.
Yeah, 'cause each
no
business
matter
can have
what it
one.
says.
So if you had one here, you can't also have one someplace else in the city.
Well,
Yeah, you could.
the Mountain Mocha could have one for the gym, but they then could not have one for Mountain Mocha.
Correct. So as long as each business in Sandy only has one at a time. And it doesn't exceed the size and everything else. It doesn't matter what it says on it.
Okay, so that's what I'm saying. So
Yeah.
Mount Mocha could have their own sign there,
Correct,
and they could have their own sign at the gas station.
correct.
That's what I'm saying, where the wording was one per business, but that would be 2 per business.
No.
One per business physical location.
Yeah.
Not,
But
That's
is that the way it's worded?
That's what the
right?
sign code's saying, yeah. It
That's
says
what-
one freestanding temporary sign or one temporary sign attached to a building is allowed per business.
There's a legal case that supports that, because I would argue that it doesn't, unless there's some
So
kind
if
of
you
precedent out
didn't, if you
there.
didn't have that in there, then this whole site can only have one at a time.
right, I think what Jerry's saying though is how do you define business? Do you define business as the physical structure or do you define business as the entity?
Of who's responsible for the sign.
Right,
That's what I was taking it to be, who's responsible for the sign.
But I think what Kelly is saying is that the sign is owned by the business. What the business chooses to put on the sign, we can't determine. So I'm Mountain Mocha, I own the sign, but if I want to advertise for Chevron, that's what can be on the sign. So it's owned it's one per business in the way of that I can only own one sign. Am I understanding, Kelly?
That is correct. Josh, do you want to speak to that? First Amendment,
Yeah, interestingly enough, just a couple of years ago, the US Supreme Court said that you actually can distinguish between on-premise and off-premise signs under the US Constitution. So you can read the sign to determine whether it advertises that the business at that location or not. But Kelly is right, because Oregon has its own free speech protections under the Oregon Constitution, and the Oregon Supreme Court has said that you cannot. So in other states, you could do what you're talking about here, but in Oregon, we are restricted and we cannot read the sign even to determine whether it is advertising the business at that location or a business somewhere else.
So would it,
But Oregon must be
if you
different.
said is allowed per business location, how does that change it? How does that not work?
So under the code that Kelly's talking about, every business can have a sign. They can put whatever they want on it, whether it's for that business, for a different business, whether it says Kelly is great. I think this was Kelly's example, whatever they want.
Yeah,
You can't read the sign. You can just say
Because
whether they get a sign or not.
right, but if I'm allowed one per business and I own Mountain Mocha, I would read that I can have one temporary sign attached to a building per business. So I can have one sign.
attached to your building.
Yeah.
It doesn't say that. A building,
Well, that gets into Tennessee law and attaching things on other people's private property.
Yeah.
That would be a private property owner dispute at that point.
Right, because if, let's say you put a Mountain Mocha sign up on the physical therapist, that would be the physical therapist putting their sign up.
Yeah, and if.
Even
not-
if it says
yeah,
Mountain Mocha, that's okay, that's their choice.
Yeah.
But if that's
okay, I
the
would
physical
say, I
therapist
would
sign,
argue it's not that clear the way it's written. One sign per business. If I'm a business, I can have one sign only.
Well, how would you rectify it? What would you suggest changing it?
Well, that's what I was wondering about, allowed per business location. So that the physical therapist, the PT, can't have 10 temporary signs, each one representing a different business. They could only have one at that location. Is that the intent?
This is supposed to say one freestanding temporary sign. So one business can only have one.
I guess I don't understand what you're asking.
They can't have like 9 from 9 different businesses. They can still only have one. But if they choose
Okay,
to say
okay.
Kelly is great, then that's the one that they choose. They can't choose.
Okay, yeah.
Kelly's great.
Yeah, since
One.
this comes up often, if you put a real estate sign up, technically that's your one temporary sign.
I would argue against, I get what you're saying, Josh, now that. Cause that was my understanding, is kind of that off premise, like, but. I would argue against the 120 days. Why would we want to have somebody advertising something, anything, even if it's on their own property for 4 months? Why not 30 days?
Because of real estate signs.
Why don't we do a carve out for real estate then?
Because then we're reading content to determine that it's a real estate sign. It's the same thing with political signs.
Yeah,
The code says you can have them up 45 days before a general election, and we're keeping that in there. Cause it's worked fine and nobody's really challenged it. But. To know it's a political sign, you have to read it. So I don't know, but it's never become a problem, so we're
Yeah.
leaving it in there.
I'm cool, we can move on.
all right, moving on, my next one, page 26. Number 4 at the bottom of the page. Does that maximum height of 6 feet include the 3 feet of sign base?
It would,
Okay, perfect.
and so you could make it higher if you want, but yeah, it would,
So no 9-foot signs is what,
correct.
excellent.
So there, yeah, we want them kind of lower.
Right, yeah, making sure it wasn't a 6-foot sign plus a 3-foot base.
No, yeah.
Okay. Page 27 for me, number 5. It seems like having to require like home-based businesses, if they want a small sign out front, to have a 36-inch rock base seems a little burdensome. You know, you have a home daycare that wants to put their name out for rent, or, you know, somebody who cuts hair in their garage or something, and they want to kind of direct people to where they want to go.
So that falls under the home occupation section of our code, which doesn't allow for advertising.
So what would be commercial use in residential zone then?
A commercial use in a residential zone would be a church or
I think,
a daycare facility. That gets like a
nursing
conditional,
home.
like a conditional use permit approval, yeah. Like the the place that is now closed, that assisted.
Or the funeral home.
Or the funeral, that's in the C1 actually.
Oh, then, yeah, that's up on Scenic at the end of Scenic,
The,
So,
the old Montessori.
so not home-based businesses, but really.
yeah, home-based businesses can have, I think it's limited to 2 square feet, or maybe it's 6 square, that's in the home occupation section of
Yeah,
our.
I've read it, okay.
And that was one of my things, or one of my questions was on the home base, because I was reading this and okay, that's how, like, because my wife is a private piano teacher. And I don't want a sign, she doesn't, but I started reading, oh, wait a minute, this is talking about this big stone-based thing, you know? I wonder if would it behoove us to cross-reference to the home base
Yeah, we certainly could.
signage, because I mean, the sign code would be where I would have gone if I was wondering what I could do for a little home-based business.
Yeah, let me pull that up real fast. Just take me a second. Yeah, the intent in the code, if you read the home-based business section, it's, and I didn't write it, it's the same section basically since I've worked here. The intent is to not have many people come to your house, is what it really comes down to. You certainly can have people come to your house, but it can't, I think that the code says it can't destroy or deter from the residential nature of the neighborhood, so it's all complaint driven, but yeah, it's 2 square feet.
So you could have one. So if
You can, yeah, it's limited to 2 square feet. We've never even processed sign permits for them. It's a nameplate indicating the name of the resident. It says not the business name, although again, we can't really regulate that, nor would we want to. But yeah, I think we should cross-reference it.
just, yeah.
And that's in 1774-80. Good catch.
All right, taking us back to temporary signs, 1532-032. Why do they get 2?
What's that
Why do they get 2?
for a residential?
Yeah, I mean, what's the purpose behind 2?
I don't know, it's already in the code like that. They're smaller, so they cannot exceed 16, which is half the size of the commercial industrial. I don't know. That's how it's currently written. I think it's mainly written that way so you can have, this is my best guess, 2 political signs or a political sign and a real estate sign for the sale of your home. That's my guess, but I don't know. That's what the code says right now.
Number 3 would then probably be redundant.
You're on the 28,
Yeah,
the area, yeah.
Kelly, you sure that limits the number of signs they can have, like political signs? So somebody that had 4 signs in their yard would be violation.
But the interesting thing is with the current code, you have 30 days for compliance. So usually people put out the election signs about a month before the election. We've actually had this happen. And then we write them a letter saying, please take down your one sign, and we've even had people say, thank you for letting me know, I will have it down within the 30 days, which is after the election. So, I don't know, there's all sorts of ways to get around code. So you're saying number 3 should be taken out?
I mean, it says the exact same thing that number one
Right.
says.
So this additional temporary signs not exceeding 45 days, I thought I left that in there, but it looks like I sloshed it out, didn't it, doesn't it? Again, it's not really something we can enforce. The only way to enforce that last sentence is to read the sign content.
Yeah.
It's kind of a silly thing, doesn't it?
I just have 2 last comments, page 33. For D, I just made a comment of blue. As I like rotating signs. But understand why it is what it is. And then right underneath that E, these are prohibited signs. And so this would mean that I'm thinking of a flooring place that has their install truck with a wrap on it. They park in their parking lot along the, the thoroughfare. Could be considered a, a car sign. It gets driven every day, but it's parked there all weekend long when they're not doing installs, right? Or, anything along those lines, a business vehicle parked in front of the business that they use. That has every right, I think, to be, wrapped. Somebody could make them not be that, make them have to move that or change that, and that doesn't seem appropriate. Seems against the intent, maybe. I think the intent is you don't want to park a big semi-truck trailer with a giant sign in your parking lot. Or drop a trailer, or a container. Use it as a sign.
I think I've run into this before too, on the same thing with trailers
Yeah.
and stuff. It forces them to move that trailer, so they won't commit to it. Like a truck or something, by the time you notify them, you're like, hey, you're gonna be fined if you don't move it the next day, they'll move it the next day, whatever. But a larger trailer, harder to get in and out and move. So typically they won't commit to having that larger trailer. So I think keeping this in secures the ability to.
I guess,
Does that make sense?
yeah, I guess then my question then is primary purpose of providing a sign clear enough to say, hey, that install truck that gets used, its primary purpose is an install truck versus the trailer's primary purpose was a sign. I mean, is that clear enough to enforce?
I mean, isn't this saying though that if it's not registered, licensed, or insured for use on a public highway, isn't that what it's mainly getting at?
Which page are we on now?
33. I don't know why it says approved food cart twice. That's an error by me. So one of those needs to come out of there. So it's saying signs placed on affixed to or painted on any motor vehicle, trailer, or other mobile structure not registered, licensed, and insured for use on a public highway. So I think that's getting at what you're asking, Darren.
Okay.
So it's basically saying if this car is no longer registered, licensed, and insured, you can't just have it parked there to advertise for the business.
Gotcha, okay,
But I think my edits are not very well done, so
okay.
I'm reading my edits and I'm like, what did I do here? So it definitely needs some
You
modifications.
can't park that old semi truck or the piece of farm equipment or whatever it happens to be to advertise.
Yeah, so
I know.
could you do, so if you have a tractor trailer, but you don't have the tractor, you just have the trailer parked there and it has a sign on it for whatever business it is, it's licensed. It can stay there.
I think if it's registered, licensed and insured through the state of Oregon, then it probably could, yeah.
Because if it's just there, well, I guess.
Like Fred Myers could just detach, or Ace Hardware could detach.
Don't tell them.
I think we ran into, I could look and see, we had to rewrite that. I forget what it was, but one of the cities I worked for.
Yeah, we could take more.
Yeah, because
Let's
I
take a look
would like
at it.
the intent to be that they can't do that, you know,
You
those,
can't do it, right?
right, you know, your normal business install trucks, trailers that you're using every day. You know, you have a fleet of employees that come in and, you know, take the cars out. I think that's all perfectly
Well,
fine.
we had one property owner that did that over and over and over again with this semi trailer. Cause he was getting paid, he had a vacant lot.
Yeah.
He was getting paid, you know, to do it. And we had to write something to say, no, and I'll go and look and see what it was.
I know what you're talking, if it's what I'm thinking about, there had been a truck at the Weimar parking lot.
I'm not thinking of a specific
Well,
instance.
this was one, because I remembered, I drive by every day and I see this truck, and I forget what even business it was for, it was always backed up there. And I thought, it took me a long time to realize, wait a minute, that business is not in that mall. They're just advertising.
Yeah.
And they would park that truck there, as far as I could tell, and leave it. I thought it was abandoned for a while.
Couldn't
I
that be
think I
a
know what
code
you're about.
enforcement issue also? Isn't it 96 hours? It used to be 96 hours to move a vehicle.
That's a private parking lot, though.
That's what thank you, Commissioner.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so,
Yeah, I mean, we can take a look at what Patrick's done in the past and see if we can add some more clarity to it. Yeah. It's worked for the most part since I've been here, I will say. I've had a few people try to use, but typically it's on like a trailer that they just leave and unhitch there or something, but
and you caught that, that was one of my notes about the redundancy on food carts.
yeah, there's some, I don't know what happened there.
Okay.
I added it twice.
Kelly is great, Kelly is good.
I don't know, that one's all messed up, so I'm glad we're talking about it, because yeah, it needs some work anyways.
If I can grab one before we go on, go back to the bottom, at the very, very top of 31.
So this is on, okay,
Page 31. Signs advertising a business or other use which has discontinued operation within the building, on the lot, or in the development shall be deemed abandoned. And when I read that, I asked myself, so what? And I tried, okay, now my eyes were open. Where am I going to see abandoned later on in the code? You know, what? So it's abandoned. It kind of begs the question of some sort of enforcement, you know, does it mean,
Prohibited.
what does it mean?
That they have so much time to take it down. or-
Yeah, it just says it, okay, it's abandoned. Yeah, well, there's a sign over it. Yeah, it's abandoned.
yeah, so you gotta read the whole section together, so. That's one of the 3 listed non-conforming signs. And then if you go to B, it says non-conforming signs shall be removed or shall be altered, and then it gives the amount of days and everything else. 3 is an interesting one because I think it could be potentially argued that you have to read the content to determine if it's a business that's been abandoned or not.
That's true.
However, I will say that we've used this a lot in the past, and most of the time, 95% of the time, it's like a landlord that isn't even local. And we say, hey, this business moved out 6 months ago and the sign's still up, and they say, oh, we didn't even realize it was still there, and so it always gets removed. We have had like 1 or 2 instances where people have pushed back a little bit, but so I don't know, it's one of those things, should we leave it and see, or should we take it out, but
Well, why do you even have to have shall be deemed abandoned in the text? If it's following, the following shall be considered non-conforming signs. And if you just said signs advertising a business or other use should discontinue operation within the building lot or the development.
But what if that person still owns that abandoned building and they operate their business somewhere else? and they're not a street sign, so they can't advertise for it.
Well,
Well,
Could
they're
that
still
be a little
discontinuing the
loophole?
operation within the building.
yeah, it says within the building on the lot or in the development, so that would mean they're not doing anything anywhere.
Yeah.
So I would say you could just strike the shall be deemed abandoned, because it doesn't accomplish anything,
Yeah, you could do that.
because we're
We could do that.
defining it above.
You might, I don't know, float around. Take me out, but. ultimately
That
it's
doesn't
like-
matter. Okay, so what?
I did make a note that I.
Jerry, I don't know if this would have any meaning to what you're trying to say, but what do you do with a situation where you do have a defunct business and the government's shut them down and there's still signage up several places throughout the city? How long do we allow that to happen?
Yeah, well, that's. I'm just reading ahead to B. Does it say that the city can remove it?
Most of the time with most things in the code, we have, if we give them notice and we follow our own procedures, we can abate most things. And then put it on the property. We typically don't abate things, so we usually just fine, and then that gets people to do it.
That was all I had on 31.
Excellent, I'm through all of mine, so.
Mine were, let me see. Just more questions. Okay. What about those, are these considered signs? Those crazy, silly, inflatable things that, go up and then drop, and up and drop.
Air dancers,
What are they called?
air dancers.
Air dancers.
Got a big fan at the bottom.
Yes. Are those signs? I don't know.
They are, yeah.
And are they covered somewhere in here?
Yeah, they're prohibited under 15 on page 33 at the
Okay.
bottom, attention tracking devices.
Okay, what about a person who is costumed,
That's in here too.
but has no sign, is not holding a sign?
So
It's
just,
Uncle Sam on the
so
corner.
just a dude or a woman hanging
Well,
out?
I think I've seen one time
Cosplay.
that was some guy dressed in a green outfit to look like the Statue of Liberty
Yeah.
and was advertising was it a tax,
Yeah, it's usually a financial.
income tax
Yeah,
place?
tax time, or Uncle Sam.
Liberty
they
tax,
just-
isn't it?
They just stood out there, they had no sign, it's just. And
You're just a goofball wearing a costume.
yeah, I mean, I'm not saying it's regulated, but it's not.
We do have we do have a section on signs held by people that
Yeah, that's what
that we brought a lot more clarity into.
The
Uh,
costume part was deleted, right? I think I saw it as deletion.
Yeah, because it doesn't matter.
Yeah, they can wear whatever they want.
We don't regulate anybody walking down the street with whatever they want to wear, you know?
Okay, that's fine, I just,
Yeah, I think I think your question is, we would probably just laugh and go on with our day.
There'd be so many people in violation.
and I'm cool
Christina,
with that.
Commissioner Ramsay brings up a good point. We'd have a lot of violators if we
Yeah.
if we looked at what they were wearing.
I'd
Yeah,
like to report Kelly's clothing as a sign violation,
Yeah,
please.
We'd have a lot of violations in town.
I am offended by that.
Okay, some other questions. I just saw one tonight, just driving over here. Somebody had put in their front yard, one of those little, the wire, like the political ones, you just stick them in the ground. It says, please slow down. Where's it? Is that a temporary sign? I don't think it was meant to be temporary.
I mean,
Or is it when we look the other way?
Well, after 120 days, you walk down the street and go grab it. No harm, no foul.
I mean, if it's in the right of way, it's, the city can take it, but if it's outside of the right of way, then. Yeah, I was looking for this one little section in here, where's it at? It's the section on. It's a good question, section on signs permitted in all districts, so 153250.
Are they allowed to pick it up and relocate it too? And
Move it 4 feet.
So if you go to page 30. There is, let me see here, sorry. So this is signs permitted in all districts. Exempt from permits. And there is a section D. That if you could fit it under this, then I think it'd be exempt, but, you know, I don't. Says signs erected identifying restrooms, entrances, walkways, directional or information signs, including menu boards located wholly within the site.
So,
So it can't be in the right of way, has to be on private property. This is mainly for like. If you go to McDonald's or something, it says entrance here, and you know, it's a sign this big.
Oh, yeah,
It's just
out in the parking lot.
In
kind
the
of
parking
thing.
lot, yeah. So we don't do sign permits for those. And,
sorry, finish.
oh, I was gonna say, that's what this is mainly talking about. Also, if the city had like in a park, which I think we do. Or in the Centennial Plaza and it says restrooms, we're not regulating that, that's just. It's an informational directional sign. Again, you have to read content to determine, but it's. I don't know how else to do it, to be honest,
Mhm.
without.
No, I was just
I was gonna say, you can't take the sign because you can't read it, so you don't know what it's on.
Like, can you read it to allow it?
I think it's one of those things
that.
that I don't know if there's any really good way to regulate
As
it.
long as within the sign parameters of a residential.
Sorry, you just read this and it said including menu boards. Would that apply to food trucks?
I don't know.
Because I'm assuming it means like fast food menu board type things is what the intent.
It potentially could, yeah.
Okay.
So that might get you around the whole.
As long as they don't put up other advertising on
Correct.
that side of their truck. They could have their.
Again,
menu
there's
by
no
the
one
window.
size fits all approach here. So if you do square foot it, so we toyed around years ago when James was working here. He had actually a lot of sign code experience. He rewrote a couple for a few different cities he worked in. What we toyed around with in this section, I remember, this is 4 or 5 years ago, is adding some square footage and dimensions, this D. The problem with that is that every like fast food restaurant has a different dimensional sign for their menu boards. And then if we allow them big enough for the dimensions of a menu board, then all of a sudden you can have pretty big signs like on the site that wouldn't even need a permit.
Mhm.
So we shied away from actually putting a size limitation on here. I don't know, I don't really know how to do this without how we have it written and just see if it works as it has in the past.
Sorry, you keep triggering things. Electronic boards that are not allowed to change, but every 30 seconds. What about electronic menu boards?
Yeah, I think that section says that ones that are visible from,
Just
From the
visible
street?
from the right of way? Okay.
I believe, let me double check that, because it's a good point. Yeah, see, this is the rabbit hole of sign code. That you guys are going down right now.
We're always
Okay,
up for a
The
good
air
rabbit hole.
dancer, include like inflatable Santas and snowmen and Christmas time.
As long as they don't
Yeah.
say anything.
it does.
30 days.
However, if you're part of the Winterfest programming that we put on, then you're exempted from it.
But anybody else is not.
That was done intentionally, yeah.
Oh, okay.
I have a
Because-
very
Yeah.
specific question,
S-
sorry.
Oh, I was gonna say, before you ask that, some cities actually do that through an arts commission. So the arts commission has like legislative abilities to approve or deny different things through like an application program. Similar to like the Winterfest, and then you could say, you know, this is not allowed, like say lighting of a building for holiday lighting, except if it's approved by this commission. So some cities have done that with like their arts commission on approving art.
Can we put that forward for our Arts Commission?
Say what?
Arts Commission?
Yeah.
Can't throw up a big inflatable Satan
Excellent.
or something like that.
You could put on a costume though.
Yeah,
You can put on a costume, you can't have an inflatable demon.
what were you gonna ask?
What the sign I'm referring to is would fall under. It's on DeBarco, I wanna say Little Page or Yoakum Loop. I don't think it's one of those, but it's a slow sign. It's inside the, not the street, not the sidewalk, in the middle of the
Roundabout.
median. And it's lit up and it says slow, and it looks like an ODOT sign. It looks like an official sign. It's been there for years.
Yeah, and that's exempt.
Where would that fall under in our codes?
Yeah, that's exempt. Same section as that restaurant menu board thing.
Okay,
That's under the, where's it out here?
I mean, I'm sure the
Traffic
lights were not
traffic
put on
control.
by ODOT
Yeah.
or the city, they were
Control
put on by
safety
the
warning,
resident.
yeah,
Where's that one?
right here.
Oh,
Traffic
yeah.
control safety warning.
That's under A on the previous page.
Okay,